Shall we get started? So welcome everyone to today's webinar. First off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Carolina Fox, the Business Development and Channel Partner here at PBC, and I help with incoming business inquiries, and I support our channel partner network as well, who on-sell our assessments within their own consulting businesses. In regards to the purpose of today, we're looking at defining and measuring high-performing teams using our high-performing team assessment, or our HPTA. And the aim of our ongoing webinars is to upskill our client network, keep you informed about our wide array of tools, talk about pricing, ordering process, and facilitation as well. So we want to make you guys feel confident in understanding and using our tools. Any questions that you have today, I ask you to please pop them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the session, and any we don't get to, we'll distribute a Q&A document post-session as well. So our lovely Sharon Ardley will be running today's session. She's PBC's Director of Consulting, has over 25 years experience in talent management, consulting, leadership, team and organisational development, as well as executive search and coaching. So today she's going to run through the HPTA tool and interpretation of the report results, which reflect the case study that we circulated to you all. And I'll get our lovely marketing team to drop the links to the case study and report in the chat for you as well. So over to you, Sharon.
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Carolina, for that lovely welcome and warm introduction. So hi, everybody, and I am thrilled to be here today to share some insights, some thought leadership, and introduce you to the High Performing Teams Assessment. And we've got a cool acronym there. We just call it the HPTA. So that's what I'm going to be referring to over the course of today as well. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off today. Presentation, I'm hoping, will run for about 45 minutes and there'll be time for questions at the end. But throughout today's presentation, please pop any comments or questions or any insights into chat. We'd love to be able to make this a pretty interactive session going forward. And if we don't get a chance to get to your questions today, we'll circulate some comments after that as well. So the world of high-performing teams, I have to say, you know, all of us have worked for teams that we've enjoyed. So they've been high performing, they've been dynamic, they've been inspirational in some way, shape or form, but we also know that a high performing team, it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen overnight. And it takes a fair amount of effort from a leader to be able to instill that sense of productivity, performance, culture, and all those elements that we know that a high performing team have. I'm pretty confident that most of us on the webinar today have probably also worked for some teams that have not been high performing, pretty dysfunctional. And I'm sure if I looked into the chat, if you were popping, have someone worked in a performing team before? And that, so pop your comments into chat. I'd love to see some feedback there as well. In a lot of the research that we have done, we know that when it comes to any team, high performing or not, a leader's role is actually really crucial in that component. A leader's role from a high performing team perspective is an incredibly integral part, because their role here is around developing the team, maintaining and driving that performance, getting that sense of connectivity across that team as well. So from our perspective, I'm going to be concentrating today on the leader's role in the team, also how to define a high-performing team, and some of the tools that we're going to have around that high-performing team measurement and assessment as well. So we also know that as leaders progress through an organisation, they're going to need new competencies along the way. So new skills, new behaviours, new insights. And again, we also find that this is another indicator of a leader and how they tend to drive and set up a high-performing team. So as a leader progresses from a team leader to a manager to a leader to a strategic leader and so forth, there's a whole range of different behaviours that are needed, particularly around strategy, engagement, the ability to bring a team together. And certainly when it comes to defining effective leadership, a competency framework is really important around that. Now, if you don't have access to a really highly reliable, highly valid competency framework, something that may be of help is actually the Hogan Competency Framework. And if you've had experience with that, great. If not, we can send you some information as well. But there are 62 competencies here that really do define high performance leadership at this point. It's highly reliable, it's highly valid, it's evidence-based, and it's a great platform for being able to understand and define leadership before we start talking about defining high performing teams in that process. We also know that any transition from manager to leader, and from certainly an operational role to a strategic role, are crucial stages in any leader's development, and certainly their ability to lead a high performing team at this point. So it's really a key component here around getting the right balance of working in the business, so operational excellence, getting that day-to-day work done, and working on the business, which is around strategy. And certainly one of the fundamentals that we find that drives a high-performing team, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, is around collaboration and certainly accountability. These two are fundamental ingredients when it comes to high-performing teams. A leader's role in this is really key. Another component that goes with a high-performing team, and certainly a high-performing leader in that component, is that not only do they need to work on the business and in the business, but they also need to start to demonstrate that whole sense of inspirational leadership, purpose, passion, importance, and also honing their emotional intelligence skills as well. A fundamental concept that we talk to our clients about here is around leadership drives engagement. A high-performing leader tends to have a high-performing team. So I'm going to be referring to that philosophy a little bit throughout today and also bring that to life as well. Now, we know that not every team is high-performing. We know that not every team is functioning well. So being able to define, first and foremost, what are the characteristics of a high-performing team is the first stage of today. And the second stage is going to be around how we actually measure that effectiveness as well. So my aim today, I'm going to make this really practical. I also would love some input into chat as well. I'm going to keep monitoring that going through the course of today's presentation. I'll also bring to life a case study using the HPTA tool. So I'll bring that to life. And again, please pop your questions into chat as well. I'm going to end today with some practical perspectives on the HPTA, the qualification process, and bring to life also our new HPTA Credly badge, which we're really quite thrilled about as well. So pop your questions in chat, and certainly we're happy to answer those along the course of today as well. It is fantastic to see so many familiar names and messages in chat so far. So I know a number of you on today's call are pretty familiar with Peterberry Consultancy. So if you're not, we've been around for about the better part of 30 plus years, founded by Peter Berry himself. And can I say, he is still very active in our business, although he is actually nearly on a well-deserved holiday at the moment, but he is an absolute formidable force in our business still. So we're leaders when it comes to the human capital consulting space. We've got a real passion in being able to support our clients around providing evidence-based solutions to really develop great leaders that make great results, that drive great teams and organizations. And you can see from our wheelhouse here that we have quite a number of strings to our bow. And although I could talk for length on all of those, the one that we're going to talk to today is actually the teams component here. So over the course of today, I'm also going to share a number of white papers that I think will be really quite useful thought leadership pieces for all of you going forward, and we'll make sure that they get sent out after today's presentation as well. I have to say, in conversations that we're having with our clients, teams are such a hot topic. Everyone is talking about the need for teams to be a lot more collaborative and a lot more engaging. Can you just pop into chat? Who is also finding that teams are an exceptionally hot topic at the moment? Just pop in there yes or no for me in chat. Keen to get your feedback here. Oh, wow, look at all the yeses. Thanks, Lorraine. That's great, Mia. Angela, yes from you. Amanda Moody, hello. Lee Wallace, I can see you. Nathan Barnes, yes. Gosh, look at all the yeses popping up in chat. Goodness, definitely. Thanks, Kim Aitken. Peter Black, yes, thank you. Jane Stevens, hello, yes. So a number of you are seeing that this is a hot topic at the moment. Curious to know, again, pop into chat. What are why is it such a hot topic at the moment? Why are you seeing that this is being such an important topic at the moment? Pop it into chat for me, please. We're certainly finding that the conversations that we're having with our clients is all around the importance of teams being aligned to strategy and also being able to deliver. And again, a couple of comments here around getting back to performance post-COVID. Absolutely. Interesting, Robin, loss of trust. That's an interesting one. We're seeing that as well, actually. Post-COVID, Claire Goves, thank you. Amber Rose, working from home post-COVID. Yes, and that real hybrid work seems to be a real hot topic at the moment as well. Issues occurring around resilience and stress. Amanda Moody, that's an interesting component. Rochelle, certainly working under stress. Yeah, that's not surprising. And Mia's talking about interstate teams as well. Interesting, Nathan, around productivity. That's an interesting one too that we're finding as well. And we've got Jay Sharp, fatigue through turbulent times. That seems to be another hot topic as well. And for all of those comments, I completely agree. That's some of the other interesting themes and conversations that we're having with our clients at the moment too. So one of the interesting papers that we'll send out is around personality and high performing teams. It's a white paper that we've got, and it talks pretty much around some of the themes that you're actually referring to there as well. It's talking about the quiet quitters, management burnout from Harry. So there's a couple of really interesting comments there around why teams are such a hot topic at the moment. And so from a leader's perspective, it's a pretty complex time, and leadership, we know at all levels, is certainly a pretty tough spot for a lot of leaders at the moment, particularly post-COVID, and all of those comments that you were talking about there. Arena's just mentioned retention issues in teams and staff morale. Absolutely. So one of the really key frameworks that we're finding that's very helpful for clients around positioning the importance of, first of all, the leader in the team, is that leadership drives engagement, drives performance. One of the aspects here that we're pretty passionate about in the world of PBC is that we know that leadership is consequential. It can be measured, it can be improved, and it can be developed as well. The key component to all of those really great comments that you've just been putting into chat is the fact that the leader's role is pretty important. And all the research and certainly a lot of the white papers and thought leadership that we have talks to a high performing leader has typically 4 key behaviours that they exhibit. And those 4 key behaviours are around strategy and accountability. These 2 behaviours, and these are also in the Hogan Competency Framework, are very much centred around driving the business, focused on getting things done, strategy alignment, making things happen. The other 2 very important meta competencies are around inspirational leadership and emotional intelligence. That is actually the employee experience, the employee engagement component here. So when I read comments around managing the quiet quitters, the stress, the resilience, and certainly the leader's role in all of that is certainly to see what they can be doing to engage the team. We know also too that when we think about teams and their accountability, the collaboration's the key component. And that's one of the big conversations that we're having with our clients, particularly post-COVID, and the need to be able to get the team together, particularly from working from home and working remotely as well. So from this particular model, the leader's role here, as I've mentioned before, is really quite important. So from a leadership perspective, leaders drive engagement. The leadership here is, and the team is their brand. So from a team perspective, teams deliver results. Therefore, the role of the leader here is really critical. Judge the leader by the team. That again is a really key component that goes with the fundamental role of a leader. From an engagement perspective, we, and all of you would know this, there is a tremendous amount of research out there that speaks to global engagement surveys where, up to a third of a team at any one point in time can be disengaged. That's a lot. Like a lot of you on the call today, the webinar today, will be leading teams. Thinking about a third being disengaged is pretty significant. So of that third, many of them are, ready to quit the boss, quit the team, quit the organisation. And so one of the comments from certainly Ed here, Ed Turner, was saying around the quiet quitters, because there's a lack of engagement there. So thinking about the fact that people are and can be disengaged, of that third, probably about half of them are doing what's called work to rule. Start at 9:01, finish at 4:59, doing the bare minimum and just, passing go, so to speak. And of that third again, so of that 30% that could be disengaged, typically about 15% of that are just outright toxic. So there's a real need from a leadership perspective to be, addressing any poor performance, any disengagement, any disconnection, because fundamentally a high performing team, an engaged team, delivers an outcome. Results, culture, engagement. So that's that performance. It comes from that. So this particular model is peppered throughout a number of our white papers, and we'll certainly send those out again after today's call. But this model, I find, when I'm speaking with clients, when we're actually engaging in debriefs, is a really fundamental model around the importance of a leader when it comes to leading a team. Leadership drives engagement, which drives performance. And so the fundamental platform that fits underneath that, from a summarizing point, is that a leader's brand fundamentally is their team. And I think that's a really important point. Therefore, leadership drives engagement. Engaged teams deliver results. Therefore, judge the leader by the team. So this is a really key message, particularly around defining effective leadership. And again, the Hogan Competency Framework can help you do that. And also measuring the effectiveness of the leader through this process as well. So the Hogan Personality Tools and also the Hogan 360 tools are great tools to be able to not only define that high-performing leader, but also measure that effectiveness. And remember, leaders are the best learners, and that can be developed as well. Let's take a deeper dive now into the role of the leader, but more importantly, a high-performing team and what that actually is. So our HPTA assessment is a really, it's an extensive tool. It's actually one of my favorites because it sparks such interest, conversation, and it really is a tool designed for action. It highlights not only the strengths of the team, but it also highlights where there are gaps. And what I particularly like about this tool is that it highlights specifically where those gaps are. So there's actually data, evidence, information for you to work with, whether you're working with clients or whether you're using this tool within your organization. It's quite interesting also that we find that teams are a challenge for an organisation. A lot of development in organisation is centred around the leader or managers in the organisation, individual contributors. Very rarely do organisations, in our experience, tend to focus on actually developing a team or having information or evidence around how a team is performing and the effectiveness of that team as well. So we tend to hear that teams are not widely addressed. And in a lot of the cases, we find up to about 65% of teams tend to lack accountability. Not quite sure how they fit into the picture, quite sure how the work that they do aligns to the bigger strategy, not quite sure around how the roles that they do contribute to the bigger picture and so forth. So rarely is team performance measured or benchmarked. So for all of you on today's webinar, whether you are in a consulting role or in an organisation, this is a major opportunity for you to be working with your clients and your organisations around uplifting the importance of a high-performing team and uplifting the importance of the effectiveness of the team. Remember, leadership drives engagement, drives results. So this is one of the reasons why the HPTA was actually developed. It was very much a stance around PBC to develop a tool that's going to focus particularly on teams, a business-related tool that has that focus. And so not only is it going to be a tool that defines, first and foremost, what high performance from a team perspective is, but to provide some benchmarks and some global norms around it. So you can see on the screen now that the HPTA actually has two fundamental elements to it around the definition of a high-performing team. The first one's around performance. So this is actually all around what the team needs to do. So what do they need to achieve? That sense of results. And there are 6 critical success factors that fit in underneath that. Strategy right through to meeting effectiveness. In the HPTA team reports, there's actually definitions of each of those elements. So you can have a look at those, and again, you've got that information at your fingertips going forward. The other component here is around culture. So culture here is very much around that sense of behaviours, interactions in the workplace. So remember, I mentioned earlier that there are two fundamental competencies or behaviours that a team needs to exhibit: accountability and collaboration. So that's performance and culture at its best here as well. So that those definitions, as I mentioned, are in the HPTA report. So you've got some analysis around what that actually is. But a couple of interesting facts about the HPTA and how that comes into play. So from the point of view of measurement, and I'll get to this point in a moment, there's a couple of really fundamental elements that goes with the HPTA. Firstly, it's designed to be completed online. So that's helpful, and it only takes about 15 minutes. And that 15 minutes produces a pretty exceptional result that gives you that measuring and improving leadership effectiveness. So that's the HPTA message that's here. As I mentioned, it takes about 15 minutes. It's in business language, it's user friendly, and for you on the webinar today, there is a qualification process that goes with that, and it probably takes about 60 minutes to do. And so part of that's an online content component, and then there's an application piece as well. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm actually quite curious if you want to pop into chat, who's actually used the HPTA? Pretty keen to see if it's out there. So just pop in whether it's a yes or whether you've used the HPTA. Not yet, about to. That's great. Correct. Katrina Dawson, yes. Amanda Mooney, yes. Very good. Thank you, Amanda. Couple of no's, not yet. Couple of yeses. So a few of you. So going forward from today, this is a really straightforward, easy to use tool that's going to make maximum impact to your organizations. In terms of defining it, as I mentioned, there's performance and culture. There's 6 critical success factors underneath that. And there's actually 4 versions of the HPTA. So I'll come to those in a moment. And typically there's between 36 to 60 items, depending upon which version of the HPTA that you're actually using. Also contained in the HPTA is some written text, so people are able to write comments as well, and that's comments around how the team sees itself. So it's anonymized content, and those comments are also anonymized as well, but people can make comments around performance and culture and also the strengths of the team as well. It's quite interesting. The other day, Peter Berry said to me, he said, Sharon, once the report is on the table, there is no place to hide. He said all organisations should be using it because it is so transparent. And I absolutely agree with that. There's a very comprehensive technical manual that goes with it as well. And there's a range of supporting white papers. So you actually have a pretty defined consulting pack that you can literally lift up and actually put into an organisation. So there is actually some real rigor that sits in underneath it. It also works incredibly well, it being the HPTA, with the Hogan personality and also the Hogan 360. So the benefit of this is that you actually get a comprehensive set of tools that can measure and define leadership effectiveness and team effectiveness as well. We're actually working with a client at the moment who has a staged process where their very senior executive team in a very large Australian organisation, the executive team have just started, have completed their Hogan personality. So again, an opportunity for self-awareness there. They've then completed the Hogan 360. So again, opportunity for measuring leadership effectiveness there. The next stage is that they're going to be using the HPTA. So there is a set of benchmarks, rigor, information, and certainly data to inform where there's strengths and where there's growth areas going forward as well. We also find too that when we're looking at measuring and improving leadership effectiveness by using those 3 tools, so Hogan Personality, Hogan 360, HPTA, is that from an organisational perspective, you can actually then plot the progress of that. So there would be improvements in aspects such as employee experience and also customer experience as well. So we find that when those 3 tools in particular are used within an organisation with support around development, with support around the analysis of that data, that typically there is a positive impact to employee experience and customer experience. So you can actually see the outcome of that. And certainly there's a natural correlation that flows off the back of that to performance and outcomes as well. So I find this really useful to be able to present the 3 tools as one really incredible unit to get insights into leadership and also team effectiveness as well. I mentioned that there are actually four HPTA versions. So the first one is actually around executives. So the definition of that is exactly what it says. It's that executive level audience. It's people that are responsible for complete business lines or geographical regions, for example. So executive or certainly senior leadership team level. So in that particular HPTA, there are 60 items, and they're all benchmarked as well. The other one that you may find useful is the management version as well. So again, typical manager level. So teams that sit within an organizational structure, they're responsible for running a business unit, a function, or a complex project in some particular way. 60 items that sit there as well. So again, that's another useful tool as well. There are two others that some of our clients are also finding very helpful. So the first one here is around frontline. And I particularly like this one because, again, this is an important part of any organisation. So typically, it's exactly those frontline workers. They perform a function in an organisation, report through to a manager. The difference with this report is that there's actually only 36 items in this particular tool, so it's a little more succinct. The fourth one's a really interesting one. It's for agile teams. So this is a really useful tool, particularly if there are project teams that are brought together to achieve a specific function of some particular kind. So they may be on a large project that's got a defined start and finish. They could be brought together for a sprint team in some particular way. And there are 36 items that are actually in this particular version. We recently used this with a global organization that where a team was literally a global team being brought together to achieve a particular outcome from an organization. And again, when you think about a global team coming together, there's naturally dysfunctions due to things like time zones, geographical differences, communication issues, all those elements. So here's an example of where we use the Agile HPTA to be able to identify where there were gaps in performance and gaps in that team's culture. The project that they were working on was pretty significant, and there would be quite some pretty catastrophic based issues if this team didn't deliver what they needed to deliver. So being able to use that agile team based HPTA tool meant that the team could address some of the dysfunctional behaviors that were starting to come in. So this is a good one to use if a team particularly doesn't have a specific leader, or a team needs to be brought together for a specific purpose in some way. So 4 versions there, and a number of our HPTA brochures also speak to those tools as well. Let's have a look at the HPTA tool because I'm pretty excited to share this. We circulated a case study prior to today's webinar, and can I just say, this is not an unusual situation. So just by way of a bit of a hypothetical example here, let's just say that there's a tech company that's facing a couple of challenges. In this particular organisation, they've had some poor engagement survey results. Again, not surprising. Increased turnover at the middle manager level. So that speaks to some of the great comments in chat that we had earlier. And some of the executives are starting to work in silos. So some pretty interesting evidence here around the executive team not collaborating and missing opportunities to work with each other. As a result, the Chief People Officer, CPO, commissioned a 360 because they wanted to get some information, some data, some evidence around how the leaders were travelling and also measuring the leaders' effectiveness at this point. So they used the Hogan 360 for that. And as a result, they received a benchmark score of 5.4. So for those of you that are familiar with the Hogan 360, you'll know that we actually take great pride in being able to support our clients and leaders around benchmarking their leadership effectiveness. So this put the overall executive team at a score of the 25th percentile. This is an important piece of information because we advocate and certainly support our clients that teams and leaders that sit at the 75th percentile typically are high performing, have high performing teams and deliver great results. So sitting at the 25th percentile is actually pretty much a crisis of leadership here at this point in time. So as a result, the CPO has influenced the CEO to complete the HPTA because they wanted to get in under the detail in under the information to understand where there are some significant gaps and some dysfunctional behaviours at that executive level. So they undertook the HPTA, and I'm going to step you through how we would analyse that report. So just lifting this up a little bit, what we tend to find is a great process here is that once a scenario like this gets presented, then obviously the HPTA is, like I said, it's 15 minutes, it's online, it's the executive version that was used, it's pretty straightforward. Once the report is generated and it comes back to you, it's an opportunity for you then to start to think about analysing the results, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. So that analysis is really key because it gives you some fundamental perspectives around where there are strengths in that team and where there are certainly some gaps, particularly around performance and culture against those 12 critical success factors that we had a look at before. So what I find is really useful here at this point is once the analysis is done is to do a CEO CPO debrief. So it typically lasts maybe about an hour and a half, where going through the analysis of the report, stepping them through the data and getting their insights into some of the themes I find incredibly useful. The next stage after that we advocate is actually running, in this case, an executive workshop. So getting everybody together who completed the HPTA to understand the data, to determine what could be some actions going forward and assign the accountability of those actions going forward as well. So that's a workshop that we advocate as a best in practice approach to being able to address some of the dysfunctions that would go on in that team. We'd also then advocate a bit of a follow-up workshop just to make sure that some of those actions are not lost along the way. And we also advocate very strongly with clients to retake the HPTA within a 12-month period, just so again you can actually see the improvement. And the other component that I would strongly advocate on today's call is that the HPTA is actually built into the overarching KPIs for that executive team as well, so to keep it alive at the end of the day. I know the HPTA report was actually sent out ahead of today's webinar. So there's a couple of things to make mention here. So on page 3 of the HPTA report is this particular page. I find this incredibly useful because it positions first and foremost the definition of a high-performing team. Again, performance and culture, and those 12 critical success factors that fit in underneath that. That's the first positioning point that I find useful in that CPO and CEO debrief ahead of a workshop. The other aspect that I find is useful in that conversation is to share leadership drives engagement, drives results. That is a very fundamental model that certainly in my experience resonates very strongly with CEOs and indeed boards as well when I've had that opportunity to speak to a board. So that definition is the first important point. The second important point here is the team score. So that is an aggregated result of all the items, all the raters, and how they have rated. So that's actually a score of 6.2 out of 10. So that's an important point here because the next stage is actually where does that 6.2 fit in that benchmark? And this is a global benchmark. So all the teams that have contributed to the HPTA are in a global benchmark norm group. So that benchmark data, as you can see, 6.2 is sitting just a little bit below the 25th percentile. So at this particular point, there's probably a little bit of work that needs to be done. So pop into chat if you were the CEO or the CPO and you've just received this information, what do you think would be your impressions or what you might be thinking in terms of that score? Pop into chat how this might be received. Lots of work to do. Thanks, Mandy. That's absolutely. And I like the exclamation mark too there. My team needs work. Absolutely. Steve? Anyone else? What do you think the CEO and the CPO might be thinking? Very concerned. Jasmine, engaging. Doug, hopefully not too big of a surprise. Actually, Doug, sometimes it can be. Robin could verify what they know. Risk of high turnover. Thank you, Lee. Why is it, and what can be done about it? Absolutely, Maria, thank you. It's interesting. In some cases, it's not a surprise. You're absolutely right. I'm thinking of a situation recently, again, a very high profile organization, a very technically capable executive group of people, a similar exercise like this, and the CEO was stunned, full stop, stunned. So sometimes, I wouldn't assume going into a conversation to support the analysis and present the data that it's going to be an expected piece of news. I wouldn't go in naturally with that as well. So 6.2, this is actually a bit of work to be done. So I would be advocating to the CPO and the CEO at this point that they need to take this pretty seriously, and that I would be building in the importance of this organisation continuing to do a HPTA assessment, at bare minimum annually, if not more regularly than that. This is the first page that is important. When I'm thinking about analysing this, the next one, so on page 4, 5, and 6 of the report, you've actually got the highest to the lowest items, and there are 60 items, remember. I find it really interesting to look at the top 10 and the bottom 10 items and get a little bit of a flavour for what are the themes that are coming at here. So in the top 10, you'll see that there's actually a team score. That's that bolded set of numbers there, and also a benchmark average as well. So this is really helpful, particularly when presenting data to CEOs as well as the executive team. So what I'm looking for here is, of that team score, what is above the global average? So we can see here, for example, the first one, our strategic priorities are clearly defined. That is, reasonably higher than the global benchmarked average here. I also find it useful to think about what's the mix and the makeup in that top 10. So for example, there are 6 items in the top 10 that relate to the performance side of the HPTA and the critical success factors there. And there are 4 items that relate to culture at this particular point. So there's a bit of a theme here around strategy seems to be clearly defined. There's some elements around communication here as well. And as a result, there's some information here around the ability to manage and lead a bit of change along the way. So, okay, they seem to be very focused here on getting things done. It's really interesting when you look at the bottom 10, because it's always a pivot. So in the bottom 10, there's actually not only all of those items well and truly are below the global benchmarked average, but there's some interesting themes in the bottom 10. So there are 3 items here that relate to performance, and there are 7 items that relate here to culture. And how I define that is that all of these items you can see will appear under one of those 12 critical success factors. So you can actually find those pretty easy through the report. What I find here is that when I look at item 51, 52, and 53, these are all themes around collaboration. So they're not getting on. They're not connecting. They're not actually working as one team. Patrick Lencioni would call this team one. Okay, so remember in the case study, there's silo behaviour starting to happen. So they're not actually taking the time to engage with each other. Interestingly, the cluster of items 54, 55, and 56 is pretty much around, I'm just going to call it out, they're not doing the hard stuff. They're not engaging. They're not having those difficult conversations. They're probably not connecting. There's probably some withdrawing that's going on. And item 58 and 59 is all around a lack of accountability. So, so either they're not being accountable, their teams aren't being accountable, but there is something not connecting in this group at the moment. In debriefing and the CPO and the CEO, I'd be asking questions around, is this a surprise to you? What are you seeing on the ground? How is this playing out? What other evidence have you got? What seems to be dysfunctional behaviour at the moment? I'd be really curious to know what the CEO is starting to feel here at this particular stage. So again, from an analysis point of view, I'm starting to get a bit of a feel here around lack of results, accountability, there's conflict in the team, there's a collaboration issues, etc. So, this is quite an interesting journey at the moment. The next point is that on page 7 and 8 of 8 and 9, of the HPTA, there's actually a really helpful performance and culture by theme. This actually is really helpful because it gives you a lovely, just a high level view of where there are some of the major disconnects from the team against the benchmark. I find it useful to just get a bit of a sense of how big is the gap there. So overall performance, there's a gap of negative 0.7 from where the team sits to where the benchmark here is as well. But you'll also see here that there's actually a couple of big gaps around innovation and also certainly accountability and results from that performance perspective. And then from the culture perspective, you can actually see here that there's actually a couple of gaps here around, or significant gaps around trust. Okay, and that's one of the foundations of Patrick Lencioni's model here as well. Likewise with emotional intelligence, collaboration, and also resilience as well. So at this point, I'm kind of getting a bit of a feel here from the data here that there seems to be some real missed opportunities and dysfunction around the bigger picture and being able to drive those results, keep people accountability, and there seems to be some fundamental trust and collaboration issues in the team as well. So again, picking up a bit of information here. From an analysis perspective, what's really helpful in this report is that you also get I think it's a pretty insightful snapshot into not only those 12 critical success factors, so 6 for performance and 6 for culture, but you also get the frequency of responses here. You can see just how wide and diverse those scores are. But in particular, what I find useful from an analysis perspective is that you also get the benchmark score, the team score, and the standard deviation. So as a little bit of a general rule here, anything with a standard deviation of a difference of about 1.5 is an area of interest for me. So I would be, trying to get under the hood of what this would mean for this particular team. So for example, if I'm looking at well, let's look at, for example, the second last item. The team effectively plans longer term 3 to 5 years. Look at the spread there. So some people say yes, some people say no. So what is it about that not everybody on this executive team is on the same page? So these are really interesting pieces of data, again, to be able to get some insight from the CPO and the CEO in that briefing conversation, and then in the workshop to be able to get a bit of an understanding around, well, what else do people need to be able to have that level of clarity going forward? So working my way through all of those categories, those 12 categories, starts to give you some pretty granular around the data and the insights going forward. So from an analysis perspective, I would work my way through all of that pretty diligently. The other page that's really helpful is this one. So there are 15 areas of improvement that research and our insights have shared. So what's helpful about this is that everybody who completes the HPTA has an opportunity to really focus what would be some feedback around where they see the biggest areas and opportunities to improve. Now, it's a 4-point rating system. So if someone sees or feels that, for example, improved communications is the biggest item that they want to address, they want to give that 4 points. So the total here of 12 is 3 people have given that 4 points, therefore it's 12 points in terms of an overall score. So I can go 4 points, 3, 2, and then 1 point. This is quite an interesting page because for this particular example, there were actually 6 raters if I take the board out. So there are 6 people. 3 of that 6 have actually said we need to improve communications. 50% of that executive team. That is a pretty big message here. Likewise, when it comes to accountability and more collaboration. Just as a bit of a tip here, in terms of accountability and collaboration, high-performing teams at their best, nail those two areas. Okay, so they are typically not areas of focus. I find this is really helpful when running a workshop because these are the areas that help the team focus and drill down on what could be some specific actions that they can be doing to take this forward. So you'll see that there are 15 items, and the team ranking, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is then benchmarked against the global average of where that particular item appears. So for example, in this particular case, the number one aspect that this team need to focus on is improved communications. Typically that's around number 4 for most teams. So for this team, critical, important, really, really important. Okay, so analysis. The next components are around comments. So people can comment around performance, culture, and also strengths as well. Again, these are pretty much straightforward comments. It gives you some insights. They're not changed in any way, shape, or form. You get it verbatim text here as well. And I find that sometimes there's some extra little bits of nuggets of information in those comments that can really help you understand, again, some of the depth of conversations that come in underneath that as well. So at this particular stage, where I would be encouraging people to start to think about is that workshop that comes off the back of that. So from an analysis point of view, and how I find things work really well is once you've had a chance to have that conversation with the CPO and the CEO, the next stage is actually having that workshop. So the workshop here is very much around being able to certainly being able to provide insight and get people's insight into where they want to progress going forward. Just out of interest, if you were providing the analysis to the CPO and the CEO, how would you best describe the strengths of the team? Pop into chat. What would you see as being the strengths for this team, just on the short little bit of information that we've shared so far? Get stuff done. Thanks, Steve. That's a brilliant comment. Strengths of the team, what else would you see? What do you think they're doing well? Willing to go above and beyond. Understanding strategy. Thanks, Jackie. Strategy is clear. That's awesome, Penny. Operational focus. Spot on, Elizabeth. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They're actually working in the business. You've absolutely summarized that nicely. Areas of individual focus and specialization. Thanks, Doug. That's a really great point, because remember, one of the other key components in the case study here was that they're starting to work in silos. So they're getting quite tunnel visioned and they are missing the opportunity to work as a collaborative group. That is a really key point, Doug. Thank you. So that's some strengths here. Where would you see some of their biggest areas of focus? Pop that into chat. Areas of focus. If the CEO and the CPO said, what's your advice here? What are some of the big ticket items that we need to work on? Mandy, collaboration, absolutely. Penny, collaboration, spot on. Amanda, speaking up and having difficult conversations. Thanks, Amanda. That's a really key point. Lorraine, that's a great one around cultural factors, and I think there's probably some underlying issues around that too. They need a united vision. Thank you to that comment. Steve's mentioned from the report, collaboration, communication, accountability. Claire's got balancing feedback. Chanel, hello, Chanel, communication and accountability. Clear communication. Thank you, Paul. These are really, really great comments here. And certainly these would be elements I would be also raising with the CPO and also the CEO as well. So just on that point, I find that probably about an hour and a half for that conversation with the CPO. Thanks, Jackie, shared responsibility. That's an excellent comment. An hour and a half to be able to unpack the data, unpack the analysis, get the CPO, the CEO's view to what's working well, what's not working well. The other thing I find really useful in that conversation is what is the organisation facing at the moment? What are some of the other strategic issues that they're facing? What's working well, what's not? What's the engagement survey results saying as well? all of those aspects are going to be quite important. The other thing too that I find is really important in that debrief with the CPO and the CEO is, what are the messages do they need brought out in that workshop? So what's the other messages, what's happening below the line that you might need to know about as well? I find that they are helpful to inform the next stage, which is around the workshop that needs to happen. So once the debrief with the CPO and the CEO has happened, a key component then is around getting the executive team together to be able to work through the data, get exposed to the data, start to get under the hood of what some of the issues might actually be here as well. I would absolutely recommend a 3-hour workshop for that particular piece of work. So that workshop, from just a spread of those 3 hours, probably about an hour to an hour and a quarter is actually unpacking the report, literally going through the data of the report. I would also strongly recommend that you don't send the report ahead of time. You give that out on the day of the workshop. The reason why is that people can often form judgments based on that, some misperceptions around that. I find it's much easier to be able to present the information, and it's a clearer mindset for people that are in that workshop as well. So that would be one recommendation and tip there as well. So in that 3-hour workshop, again, an hour, hour and a quarter working through the report, helping them understand the data, understand the standard deviation information, getting some general perspectives to the information that's coming through. The next hour would be around the group actually getting familiar with the information. So breaking them into some smaller groups, some smaller teams, get them to start working through each of those 12 critical success factors, 6 for performance, 6 for culture, getting their perspectives to what's working well, what's not working well. The output of that needs to be at least 1 to 3 areas of focus going forward. And my biggest tip here is to make sure that when you walk away from that workshop, that there are specific actions. Not, for example, we're going to work on our communication. Way too broad. What does that actually mean? In the workshop itself, I also find what works well is actually getting people to take responsibility for that. So who's going to lead driving that? It needs to be a combination of the CEO and others in that group as well. So that creates a bit of ownership, and it starts to get some traction going forward. The other aspect that I would highly recommend is a follow-up session of some kind. One of the key actions that I also advocate at the end of that workshop is that there is some sort of follow-up process internally within that next 30 days. The reason why is so that it doesn't get lost. Everyone gets back to work, back to their normal BAU, and all that great insight and conversation gets lost. So an action is, we need to readdress this in the next 30 days, and then maybe another follow-up workshop, maybe in within the next 90 days is probably a good idea at that stage as well. I've mentioned it a couple of times. I would also then advocate that the HPTA is done, at least retaken within the next 12 months as well, because that will really help drive that efficiency and drive that insight around creating that high-performing team as well. So there's some tips and some ideas around what that would look like. Quickly before we cover off and allow a couple of minutes for questions, just a little bit of a summary here. I've mentioned that it takes about 15 minutes to complete. It provides you with some really clear metrics, as you can see from the report today. It's pretty easily administered. We've got a great team here that can help you set all of this up as well. So from a logistics point of view, our Hogan Orders team can certainly support with that as well. It's a pretty straightforward delivery from a workshop perspective. We're certainly here to help in terms if you've got any questions around the design and also the facilitation of that as well. The technical manual is brilliant. It's straightforward. It gives you some great insights, and there's certainly some benchmarks available too, which we can support you with going forward. Following today, I would encourage everybody on today's webinar that if you are not HPTA qualified, please do. I really hope that you see the value of this tool, the insights that it can give, and certainly how it can support teams to become way more effective and high performing. We also have our Credly badge, so we'll send out some information on that once you do get qualified. And from my account, I think we've got about 5 minutes left. So if there's any questions that I can help with in the next 5 or so minutes, it will be my pleasure. Carolina, hello.
Hello.
Any
Thank you so much.
any questions?
We do have a few. Thanks for that. That was awesome. I've got to pick a few because we probably won't have enough time. So one
There's one.
was
I've got here, what's the time and cost for accreditation? The time to get, so the qualification probably takes about 60 minutes, and there's a kind of an online component, and then there's an application component. So it's about 60 minutes, and there's no cost for that.
We've got one here. When working with a team that received consistently high scores, how do you ensure that they continue to strive for improvement and avoid
do you know, I had
complacency?
that once. I had a team that was above the 90th percentile. Doesn't happen very often, can I say? Joy. Fabulous. So their challenge was how they maintained that. So whilst there was actually, even though they were in the 90th percentile, there were a couple of little areas that they needed to focus on. One of those was actually meeting effectiveness. So that was actually one thing that they did need to focus on, but their opportunity going forward was how they maintained that. So they spoke about being able to continue to be resilient, continue to support each other through stressful times. They were more focused on stretching themselves even further, and so they were starting to put in place more KPIs around productivity. They were social functions was another one. They were a hardworking team, and they missed the opportunity to stop and celebrate. So there's always ways that people can continue to build on that success if they are above the 90th percentile. That's a great question, Carolina. Thank you.
Another one, do you still recommend using the HPTA if there's a bit of a lack of psychological safety in the team?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And one of the benefits of the HPTA, particularly if there is a lack of psychological safety, is that no one is identified in that HPTA. So it actually really does help create an environment to have some of those conversations. I would be advocating upfront the importance of psychological safety, set ground rules for that facilitation exercise. You may need to do it in stages, but certainly it has and can be done, particularly if teams have a huge degree of mistrust amongst them as well. I think we've got time for one more question by my clock, Carolina.
A lot of questions about costing, so I'm happy to jump in on that one. So our executive and management versions are 1,200 plus GST, that's in AUD, and USD as well without the GST. And the frontline and agile are 900. So
thanks, Carolina. That's great. Well, I think we're at time.
Wrap it up, and we'll answer all the rest of the questions in a nice document to distribute after the session.
Lovely. I'm conscious that everyone's got a busy Thursday to get to. Can I just say thank you, everybody who was on today's webinar, for making the time, and we really hope this has been of great interest and certainly a valuable use of your time. Can I also do a big shout out to the team behind the scenes here, because these events don't just happen. The team have been awesome in being able to pull this together, and likewise with yourself, Carolina. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, team, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Sharon. See you all.
Okay, bye all.